Good afternoon. This is Cityline. Hi, I'm Jackie Hall.
And I'm B.T. Bentley. Today on Cityline, we're talking about domestic violence.
Displayed on our screen is a hotline number that provides counseling and referrals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to battered women, children, abusers, and concerned friends and relatives.
Please do not hesitate to call if you are a victim of domestic violence or if you know of someone who is a victim of domestic violence. You may be saving a life.
Domestic violence, today on Cityline.
Coming up on Newscap, more than one call on the mayor's idea about decriminalizing drugs and a new slogan for New Yorkers, stay in line for 89. I'm Isis Arabe.
Hi, I'm Harold Anthony. And if you're not familiar with the vocal stylings of Bobby McFerrin, stay tuned for a mini concert on the entertainment page. You'll be amazed.
Good afternoon and welcome to Cityline. As we mentioned, our topic today is domestic violence, and it's an issue that is of grave concern to this and many communities across the country.
It certainly is.
We've gathered a number of individuals here with us who are going to help us both understand the problem itself as well as those who are the victims and the ones who cause the pain. First with us is Fatima Wilson, who is the shelter coordinator at the House of Ruth. Next is Dr. Colin Phillips, who is a group leader with the Batterers Program at the House of Ruth. Next to him is Tracy Brown, who is director of the Domestic Violence Unit of the State's Attorney's Office. And next is Renee Dorsey, who is a paralegal in the legal clinic at the House of Ruth. And we want to thank all of you for being with us today.
Thank you for being here. Welcome. Let me just ask, from perceptions of news articles and reports on the air, it appears that domestic violence incidences are increasing, not only in our own area, but across the country. Is that accurate?
Well, probably what's happening is that more reporting is being done. Domestic violence is probably one of the most, if not the most, underreported crime in the nation right now. And so I think because people's consciousness have been raised about the issues, some of the issues involved with domestic violence, that yeah, more people are reporting that it's happening to them.
And how is that playing out, both in the courts as well as the civil areas, in terms of the nature of the crime? Has the crime changed much? Are we seeing anything different? Is it more violent?
I don't know that the crime has changed. I think that more people are coming into the system because the system is beginning to be perceived as something that's going to be helpful to them. And it's only been in recent years that the system has started counting domestic violence cases, identified them as domestic related as opposed to stranger assaults. In the State's Attorney's Office, our unit prosecutes about 3,000 cases a year, and that's only in some portions of the city. We don't cover the whole city.
Let's clarify what falls under the umbrella of domestic violence. What are we talking about? Are we just talking about spouse abuse or what?
Okay, basically when you talk about domestic violence, you're talking about a relationship between two individuals who may be married. They don't necessarily have to be married. Intimate relationships where people are experiencing physical abuse, psychological abuse. There may be destruction to property, personal property and pets. There may be sexual abuse. There may be marital rape between men and women, between couples who are not heterosexual. There's all kinds of domestic violence going on between in intimate relationships. So basically that's what we're talking about.
In the other forms, I've been hearing lately even about psychological abuse.
Well,
how is that played out?
Psychological abuse is probably the most insidious type of abuse that a person can experience in a relationship, because it's something sometimes that's hard to name. It may be name calling. A woman may be suffering all kinds of mental anguish and degradation as a result of being abused from her partner. She does not, or he does not always have to be hit. Most people think in terms of domestic violence as punching and hitting, but a lot of psychological abuse goes on, and you can almost not have psychological abuse if you're being physically abused.
Yeah, there's a whole range of tactics that men use in the intimate relationships that Fatima is talking about. Psychological abuse is one of the most effective tactics that is used in order to achieve the ends that the men have, in order to to get their way and to meet their needs, which is really where men are coming from when they turn on their partners like this.
Now, we know that generally speaking, it is the man who is the abuser or the batterer, and it's the woman who is the abused.
Absolutely.
Generally, but not always. Now, let me ask you, what then is the provocation for abuse on the part of the man? Is it about controlling the mate, or is it an indication of lack of control of the batterer?
No, it's not lack of control. It's the need and the desire to control that mate. One of the things that we focus on most of all and stress most of all with the men that we work with is that you are not out of control when you are violent with your women. You're very much in control. It's very intentional. It's often very carefully planned. These are not men who go berserk. These are men who by and large know what they're doing and do it intentionally in order to control their women and to maintain control through various tactics.
But does this control in the house mean that maybe there is frustration outside of the house and thereby limited control and power elsewhere? And so they transferred, at least they dominate somewhere?
It's directed towards the partner usually, but something very important to note about domestic violence is that it degrades and it demeans her, and that is why a great number of cases just are unreported, because it's just so humiliating and it's a great deal of shame that's involved in it.
What's the picture of the quote-unquote typical victim of domestic violence? How long has it gone on? What was the final straw that made them finally come forward and seek help?
Well, I don't think there's a typical victim, okay? There's so many different prototypes of what a victim is. I think basically what we're talking about is a woman who has lost all of her self-esteem. In many cases, well, I think people are fairly aware of the fact now that domestic violence happens in all types of families, all races of people all across the country. So again, there's not a typical picture of what a victim looks like. But certainly one of the things we have to talk about is a woman having lost her esteem. Usually what will bring her to us or to an agency that can help her is that she has gotten so beaten and so bogged down emotionally that she can't take it anymore. Lots of times women will be talking about suicide, they'll be talking about maybe hurting their partners, just ending it all, and they can't see the bigger picture at that point is when they come to us.
Sometimes the reason why they come into the legal or the criminal justice system is because they've tried all of the other avenues they know on their end. They've told him to stop hurting, her family has done that, and they're looking for somebody else outside of themselves, somebody with authority to say you're not allowed to do this. Many women don't necessarily want to end their relationship, they just want to end the violence.
Now, there is a cycle, isn't it? A cycle of domestic violence. Sometimes it starts slowly and then it gradually builds. Then there is the, I'm sorry I did it to you and I won't do it again. Tell us about that cycle of violence that generally takes place.
Well, there's considered to be a three-phase cycle. One is the tension building stage, and usually a woman will get some indication from her partner that he's getting to the point where he will hit. For different families, it manifests itself in different ways. Then you have the actual battering that takes place, where a woman will be hit, kicked, punched, a weapon will be used to hurt her, and then there's what we call the honeymoon period. That's when the initial phase of violence is over, and there's a lot of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I won't do it again. The woman is persuaded or actually even threatened to the point where she feels that she can't leave the situation and she feels like she'll try again.
And this will repeat itself?
Will repeat itself, absolutely. It will continue to repeat itself, and the thing that we have found is that the violence almost always escalates. It doesn't it gets worse as time goes.
Okay, we're going to dig deeper in a minute. We have to take a break right now, but there's a lot more to cover, so please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Our topic today is domestic violence. It is an issue of concern to all of us, and we'll continue our discussion now. We were talking about the cycle of violence. It just simply repeats itself after the honeymoon phase of it. What kinds of tactics, Colin, are used during either this cycle or during the battering period?
I think one of the things that people really need to understand about domestic violence is that the physical violence, however terrifying and terrible it is only part of what the woman goes through. And what she lives with on a day-to-day basis, we've discovered, basically because of things that women have told us, what she lives with is a whole series of tactics of abuse that men use in order to maintain, their control in the home. And so one of the things that the cycle does is, although it's a helpful tool for understanding it, it doesn't get at the range of abuse that the woman experiences.
And what are some of those tactics?
Okay, there's a whole series of them. Intimidation. I may never, the man may never need to actually hit the woman in order to maintain control if he can intimidate her sufficiently. Threatening her, threatening to take away the children, threatening to leave her penniless. All kinds of economic abuse, sexual abuse, including marital rape. We know that marital rape is an epidemic that we haven't even begun to really get at. Psychological abuse, emotional abuse, we've already spoken a little bit about that. There's a whole range of tactics like this, and physical violence, we find, is, as it were, the final weapon that the man has available to him. If the other things don't work, then he's going to beat her.
Let me ask you, is it basically that before it becomes a criminal matter, it must reach the stage of physical violence?
That's correct. There must be some kind of a touching or a threat to do some kind of harm.
And once it reaches that point, often the victim goes back after an initial settlement. Why? Why can't they make that break to get away until the situation is in hand?
Well, often when the victims are provided with support and information from the system, they in fact don't go back on their desire to prosecute, but continue to be cooperative with prosecution. I think what happens during the honeymoon phase that was mentioned is that there's that new commitment to the relationship. The batterer makes a promise never to do it again. She then sometimes feels guilty for bringing the system into their lives. And so then sometimes she becomes uncooperative. We try to keep her cooperative with the system, to communicate both to her and to the assailant that domestic violence is a crime.
I read somewhere that it's considered a felony.
Some kinds may be a felony, others are misdemeanors, which is a lower level.
I recall a similar statistic where the inequity involved was that had the same violence taken place against a stranger, it would be a felony, whereas in most cases, in most jurisdictions, it's considered a misdemeanor.
Right. It's a matter of charging, that in many jurisdictions, things that would be charged as a felony if it were strangers are actually charged as misdemeanors when it's domestic.
Now, from your experiences in your counseling of victims, why would a woman stay so long being demeaned, abused, either physically, sexually, or psychologically? Why would a woman stay?
It's really important to note that in the honeymoon phase, he's acting the way she wants him to act now. He's being very apologetic. He's buying her flowers. He's promising to go to counseling. He'll say he'll never do it again. And he's acting just the way she wants him to act. So she's acting like, well, she's thinking that, okay, it's going to be better now, and that's what he's telling her. So that's why she stays. I think that's a very important part of the cycle, because that's the phase that makes her stay into the relationship.
But it's repeated, you say, and it's repeated. But why stay?
I think one of the things that we mustn't lose sight of is that people go into relationships basically because they care and love each other. And one of the things Tracy said is that they want intervention for the violence to stop. We don't advocate that women leave their spouses or their partners. We advocate that they be safe. Okay, and there are many other factors, economic factors, there's family pressures, there's society pressures. Many, many times women don't literally, and having worked in the shelter, this happens again and again and again, literally don't have any place else to go. Shelter is not, it's not the all in all, it's not the end for a woman. She can only stay at a shelter for a certain amount of time, and then if she doesn't have the family supports, if she doesn't have the support she needs from society, maybe in terms of housing or economics, then she has no other choice but to go back into the situation and hopes that it will change.
Okay, we're going to bring in a couple of other individuals into our discussion. Both of them will remain anonymous, And for that reason, we have given them pseudonyms to use. And I'm going to begin with the person we're going to call Susan, then we'll talk to David. Susan, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
If you could, tell us a little bit about your situation. What happened to you and where your situation stands now?
Well, my situation started gradually, and it started with smacking, and basically it came after the children. And by me being basically a family-orientated person, I tried to make it work. And I left when I finally came to the conclusion that it wouldn't work.
What type of violence did you find yourself subjected to?
Emotional, physical, psychological, all of. I stayed in my relationship. Huh?
Go ahead.
I stayed in my relationship for a long period of time until I found out it wouldn't work.
Were there children in the home? Do you have children?
Yeah.
What
They
kind
was
of...
there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, they was there.
What kind of impact did the violence that you were undergoing have on your children?
Well, with my oldest son, I feel as though it had emotional abuse for him because he's very close to me, and he hated to see his mother get hurt.
What about your other children?
He's a baby, so it didn't affect him that much.
Did you ever
Except
fear
for
for your
he's violent.
children? Did you ever fear for your children? Were there any?
Only my oldest son, you know, because he would want to jump in, and it's very easy to hurt a child.
When did you, after all of the violence and the intimidation and the psychological abuse, when did you realize enough is enough, this is the straw that broke the camel's back?
Okay, after he found, he knew he had control over me, and when he pulled the weapon, then I knew it couldn't work.
Okay. David, let's bring you in here. You have been on the other side of the coin. First, why don't you tell us a little bit about your situation, what was involved, and again, where you are now?
Well, the type of abuse I was involved in, it ranged just about all that's been mentioned, you know, and I got to the point where weapons had become involved, and I thought to myself that, you know, I did need help.
Did you recognize afterwards that you were doing physical harm to someone who could not, I guess, protect themselves from you? Any remorse?
Yeah, that came to mind, you know, but during the abuse, when the abuse was taking place, you know, that's what brings you to that control. You're looking for control, and when you are controlling, it doesn't occur to you that you're hurting someone. It's just that you're getting the control that you want. And then later on, you think about the person that you hurt, and you realize that, hey, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Okay. We're going to have to take a break now, Susan and David and the rest of our guests. And we will come back and we'll continue our discussion with you about domestic abuse. Please stay with us. Now here's this week's community calendar.
Hello, my name is Alan Smith. The Morgan State University Jazz Ensemble, conducted by Melvin Miles, will present an evening of jazz on Thursday, May 5th at 8 p.m. The evening will include Baltimore's First Lady of Jazz, Miss Brenda Alford, winner of the 1987 Baltimore Jazz Fest, Mr. Hassan Sabri, and jazz trombonist Charles Funn. This musical event is open to the public, and for tickets and further information, call 444-3087 and 444-3123. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bernadette Owens. The Dunbar High School February-June class of 1963 is proud to announce their 25th year class reunion to be held today, May the 1st from 5 to 9 at the Godfrey's Famous Ballroom located at 1717 North Charles Street. The evening will include a cocktail sip and dance. All alumni are welcome. For further details, please call 323-1306.
If your group or organization would like to announce an event, please write us in care of City Line, WJZ-TV, Television Hill, Baltimore, Maryland, 21211, or call us for further information at 466-0013 between the hours of 9 and 5.
Welcome back to City Line. Our topic, of course, is domestic violence. And before we left, we were talking with two individuals who, again, are named, we are calling them Susan and David, and are being shown in such a way that you cannot identify them. David, let me get back to you, if I can. I understand that you are in the program, one of the programs at the House of Ruth. Tell us about initially how you got into the program, what difference the program has made to you, and whether or not you think it's going to make a difference in your home life.
Okay, initially, well, I was ordered by the Court of Law to attend the House of Ruth. I'm in there now. This is my second stint. This time I volunteered to attend the House of Ruth, and basically what happens in a group, you get a group of men to sit down and they talk of what brought them to their abusive situations, and try to look at other routes you could take to, around abuse in your home situations.
As a result of the counseling, David, what have you learned about yourself that that perhaps made you respond to your mate the way you did prior to counseling? What did you learn about yourself?
Well, I learned that what was basically causing me to abuse a woman is the way I was looking at women. I was belittling women, and when you belittle someone, you tend to not give that person the respect that they deserve as an individual, and that's what happens.
Was that, as you look back even over your childhood, was that perhaps the kind of environment that you came under and you saw that in your own home?
No, basically, the thing I can reflect the most about my upbringing that can relate to my abusive situation is the fact that I grew up, feeling inferior myself. And when you're in a situation and you're losing control of your relationship, you get those inferior feelings. And the only thing, like you're losing control, and the only thing to get that control back is to resort to abuse, physically or emotionally.
Let me ask, whether or not there is a correlation between age and the nature and severity and frequency of abuse. Are we seeing a lot of it among younger couples? Is it pretty even throughout age groups, or is there any correlation that has been identified?
In the legal clinic, we do a great deal of telephone advocacy, and we also do legal representation. I've talked to women as young as 19, and then we have clients in 60s and their 70s and their 80s, so there's really no age discrimination.
The criminal situation be about the same?
Yeah, the most of them fall between 20 and 40. I think some of the questions are who comes to the system for help, who would call the House of Ruth, who has those resources.
I wanted to just pick up a little bit on what David said. Do you remember, David, you were saying a few moments ago about how you tended to belittle women. One of the things that we find is most fundamental to all of our clients, all of our male clients in the Barrows program, is the use of male privilege, which is a very powerful, powerful tactic. Male privilege in our society is, is something that men feel entitled to. And the sense that women are there essentially to meet the needs of men. And I think we find in general that this is something that all of our men tend to be very invested in. you know, that the man is the head of the household and the woman is there to cook and to clean and to meet his needs. And I think we tend to find, therefore, that you know, that one of the things that we really have to do is to challenge that belief system. Mm-hmm. That's very, very much integral to the kind of program that David is in.
Susan, let me ask you, sitting here listening to this discussion, listening to David's words, do you see anything similar to your situation? Have you learned anything from your point of view that kind of runs together with what David was talking about?
Well, with me, I'm like, right now I'm rebuilding my self-esteem, which I lost, my pride, and a lot of other things that I've done lost during the years that I'm trying to regain. And counseling has helped me do that.
Let me ask you as well, Susan, when you went to the house of Ruth, what did you find there that perhaps gave you the comfort that you needed to know that you were in a safe haven?
Just the word safe.
What was the house of Ruth like for you, having left your home with your children and gone there? What was it like? What did you find?
I found women in the same position, other women in the same position, you know, different routes, but they were basically in the same position. It had occurred before.
At some point in your life, did you feel that perhaps you were all alone in that?
No, I never did, because I have been seeing violence ever since I was a child. You know, not within my mother and father, but my sisters and brothers' relationships between each other's friends.
Okay. Let me ask you, Fatima, I asked Susan what she found at the house of Ruth that would have given her the sense of finding a safe haven. What do you offer to the women who come there, either as alone or with children?
Okay. First and foremost, our agenda is to provide a safe haven for women and children, and that's what we do best, okay? We advocate for women in the court systems, and Renee can talk a little bit more about that. We advocate with women for housing. Whatever a woman says she needs, we try to direct her in that situation and get that connection for her. One of the things that we do offer is counseling to women who are abused. We offer group counseling and we offer individual counseling. The first thing we want to do is to meet the immediate need. It's to make her feel safe, make she and her children feel comfortable, and then everything else we build on. Many times women come in and they're so devastated they may not even talk for a couple of days. They may not even tell you what they want. Many instances women come in and they want to reestablish themselves in new housing, and that's one of the things we work real hard with women around, reestablishing themselves. If women need to be referred to outside resources, we do that. We keep a woman initially for 21 days. We do have a transition period. If a woman is a good candidate for our transitional housing, she will move into transitional housing. So she can initially stay for 21 days, and then it's decided later on by the staff if she will be kept in transitional.
Okay, we're going to find out a little bit more about the House of Ruth, but we do have to take another commercial break, so we'll hold on for just a second. We'll continue our discussion. Stay with us.
We're continuing our discussion on domestic violence, and before we run out of time, we need to talk about the impact of domestic violence on the children in the environment, and then what you do at the House of Ruth that helps the children to get over it.
Okay. Well, of course, if a child is in a situation where there's a lot of chaos going on, emotional or physical abuse going on, it will impact upon the child. What we are seeing with children who are coming to the shelter is that many times they're having inappropriate acting out behavior. In many instances, a very high instance, children are being sexually abused. Along this whole area and issue, we're talking about control. Many times the control filters down into the children, and the children are being physically and or sexually abused. What we do at the House of Ruth with children is that we have a children's program that tries to focus on the needs of the child while the child's in shelter, make the necessary referrals to get the child the help that the child needs. We do have a children's counselor. We do have play therapy. We have a beautiful play area for the children where they're safe from harm's way also. And we also have a situation with the community school where the children are allowed to go to that school until their mothers have decided what they want to do. So a child need not be out of school because he or she is in shelter.
Okay, now a recurring theme that has been mentioned at least 3 times that I can recall is safe, which means someone has fear. Can you tell us a little bit about that fear? Tell us a little bit about the safety that what women need to do to be safe.
Well, usually we get a lot of calls from women who have just recently been abused, and what we do is we tell them that they can go to the district court in their area and they can apply for a protection order, and basically what that order does is it orders the abuser to refrain from further abuse. Sometimes it stops the violence, sometimes it doesn't. She can file contempt charges against him if he violates that order, and that order lasts for an indefinite period of time. So that can be very useful. You know, she can go back with him, and that order is still in effect.
Aren't there times when taking it as far as calling the police and then going to court can also incite the batterer to do even more horrendous things?
I think that that's a really important issue, and it's one of the things that keeps women a lot of times from going into the system. There's no doubt that the intervention of an outside system is going to cause a crisis. I think that the batterer at that point will be the most extreme of any behavior he's going to be, either his most violent or his most apologetic. But what it's important for women to see is past the short-term risks of doing that to the long-term benefit of taking some kind of action and communicating to him, getting the system to communicate that she's not going to tolerate it anymore. And I think fear is one of the main reasons why women don't leave. That fear that if they do, the repercussions are going to be worse. He may have told her, if you ever leave, I'm going to kill you. I know where you're going. And the reality is that she doesn't have very many safe places to go.
And along those same lines, many times when women have left the situation, they're still being harassed and they're still being the targets of abuse. So people like to think that, you know, the first thing that comes to a person's mind, why didn't she leave? Well, first of all, she doesn't leave because she's afraid of the physical repercussions. And second of all, many, many times women do leave and they are still harassed and they are still physically abused.
A third of the incidents of violence that occur to, to women occur after they're separated, from the man.
That's what we seem to be seeing in the newspapers and on television concerning the reports of domestic violence. You talked about advocacy a couple of times. Let's hear a little bit more about your advocacy program and how detailed is it and what are the things that you offer and actually help the women to go through.
Okay, basically what we do is we have legal advocates that will go in and advocate for women in court. And what we do is we prep her for testimony. We explain the proceedings to her. If the defendant has opposing counsel, we tell her what he will probably ask her and what the judge needs to hear. Additionally, we offer criminal court advocacy where we also accompany her to criminal court, and we will talk to the state's attorney and let the state's attorney know that this is serious. A lot of times it's put on a stat docket. We're going to push against that.
And what's a stat docket?
A stat docket is basically when the case is put on hold, and if he re-abuses her, then she can contact the state's attorney's office and they can put the case back in court. That rarely happens. We want some type of conviction. We want it to go before a judge, and with a stat docket that doesn't happen.
Also, in terms of advocacy for women in the men's program, we have ongoing contact with their partners, and that continues throughout the time that they're at the House of Ruth.
But what kind of protection is there once they leave the House of Ruth, whether or not they have a court order? What type of assistance is there to help them allay their fears? Or is there?
I mean, there is. You know, we tell them what's available for them. They can file criminal charges. They can, if he's harassing them over the telephone, you know, they can get telephone harassment against him. We do restraining orders a lot of time, ordering the abuser to stay away from her home or from her workplace or wherever she is. That works a lot of times.
I think also that probably something I need to say, when a woman is in counseling at the House of Ruth, one of the first things we do with her is to sit down and work out a safety plan with her. What are you going to do in the event this happens again? And the reality is that women fairly much have a gauge for when the violence is going to start before it starts. So we sit down and work out individualized step by step. Well, I'm going to put this away. I'm going to take this to a neighbor's house. I'm going to get all my important papers together. I'm going to have this extra set of keys, this little bit of money or however much money a woman will need, so that she won't feel so isolated and alone when it happens again, and that she can get out and be safe and have some kind of resources. Many times women come to shelter, no shoes on, the clothes on their backs. So we try to work out a plan for them so in the event that they can anticipate that the violence is getting ready to start again, they can get out.
We haven't much time left. Let me ask you, is there any way, any advice that you can give to women, any type of assistance you can give them before it reaches an absolute crisis stage? Are there any signs that a woman can look for, a spouse can look for? I don't want to put this strictly male against female.
Especially in an instance where there may be a listener right now in an environment that is injurious to her health. What would you say to a woman in that situation?
What I would like to say to her is that she's not alone and that there is help. She needs to pick up the telephone. She needs to call the House of Ruth hotline and speak with the counselor, and we can get her help. We may not be able to bring her into shelter immediately. We could refer her to another shelter, but we can talk to her to reassure her that there is something that can be done.
I think that the most important thing for a woman to know is what she can do. And most women don't know what they do. They only know what their husbands tell them. And when they call the House of Ruth, we give them options and we tell them everything that's available to them. That's all they need is that information, and they can make a decision as to what they want to do.
So part of it is the woman's regaining her own self-esteem and her own control over her life.
Yeah, we're really looking to empower the
Empower
women that we serve. That's right.
That sounds like a general community concern, doesn't it? Empowerment of women. Any parting words from you?
Just to use the system that we're there to help. We have a pro-prosecution policy in the state's attorney's office, and the system is responsive to her needs.
Okay, we're just about at the end.
Now, Susan, David, what about you? What are your prospects now? How do you feel about yourself and where you're going?
Well, I feel the direction that I'm going in is, I feel I'm headed in the right direction. Since I've volunteered for the House of Ruth, I've also accepted Christ as my Savior, and you know, I look at things differently. I see things differently. I look at women differently, and I look at myself and my situation and the way I live a lot differently than I did before.
Okay, Susan, real quickly, how about you?
Repeat the question again.
Just how do you feel about yourself and your future prospects? Do you feel good now? Better?
Just like, I feel like this, just like my self-esteem was slowly taken away, I'm slowly getting it back.
Okay, well,
All righty. We thank you, David, and we thank you, Susan, for having come here today, and all of our guests for sharing information on a very vital issue, domestic violence. We will put the hotline number up again and again before we go off. Stay with us.
On Newscap, what would cause thousands of people to call into a TV station? It's a riddle, and the story has begun, but the final chapter still not written. I'm Isisara Bay.
Still to come, a mini concert with the improvisational wizard, 5-time Grammy Award winner Bobby McFerrin.
The numbers may not be in his favor, but presidential candidate Jesse Jackson still looks and acts like a winner. The Jackson juggernaut rolled into Ohio late last week, making several local stops. Jackson spoke to the crowds about drugs, crime, politics, and government. Right now, Democratic candidate Michael Dukakis leads the race in the number of delegates needed to capture the Democratic nomination. As Jackson put it after the New York primary recently, Mayor Koch made hysterics while he, Jackson, made history. According to Jackson workers in New York, Mayor Koch's repeated attacks on Jackson did have a negative effect on voters statewide. But Action Jackson swept New York City, the first African-American to win a citywide election there. And his victory appears to be laying the ground for more political change in the Big Apple. Jackson supporters have now turned their attention to Mayor Koch and plan to stay in line for 89 to vote him out of office. Call him Mayor Schmoke radio talk show host. That's what he'll be one evening a month from now on. The mayor kicked off his radio talk show last week on WJHU-FM. It's a 1-hour phone-in program the first Thursday of every month. The first show centered on a particular theme, the mayor's idea about decriminalizing drugs. He stated his case to the audience.
I assure you that the people who traffic in drugs recognize what would happen if an addict was able to go to a physician and get a prescription for heroin and to be counseled off of that drug over time, as opposed to a guy having to go out and rob your house and your neighbor of all your goods and then fencing them on the street. It just would be tremendous in terms of the impact on their profits. And at least let's think about it and talk about it. And you know, for those who say don't try, you know, let's ask, well, what's the other? You know, give me another way, because what we're doing now is just not working.
Programs will be simulcast over WEAA each month. In international news, thousands of citizens in Cairo, Egypt are jamming the phones trying to solve a television riddle. Actually, it's a riddle a day, broadcast every afternoon during the month of Ramadan on Egyptian television. The riddle is announced at 3 p.m. Then viewers have 3 hours to call in the solution, and call they do, jamming phone lines all over the city. Emergency calls to hospitals or first aid centers lose their connection in the dialing deluge. Why the interest? The daily reward for solving the riddle is $750. Here's a story that will put a song in your heart. The melody starts on Harlem Avenue in West Baltimore, but this song will end in Harlem, New York next Friday. That's when the final chapter will be sung. Tony, Alonzo, Anthony, and Paris, 4 guys who love to sing, and their mother, whose dream is to see them sing.
Yes, I'm sitting right here, waiting for you, my dear, wondering if you're ever.
2 weeks ago, the final chapter won a local talent contest that will send them to the Apollo Theater in New York, twice. They went once last week with 3 busloads of friends for their shot at the spotlight. But first, they had to get past the crowds known for their hostility to bad acts.
They'll boo you 1, 2, 3 until they hear you. If you don't look right, they boo you.
Then on to the main competition, but fate stepped in. An electrical fire shut the Apollo down for the night. But the Apollo has invited them back to perform next week. The Apollo has also agreed to foot the bill for all their fans to go back to. We'll keep you posted. That's Newscap for this week. Enjoy the rest of the day and the week ahead. I'm Isa Sarah Bay. Now stay tuned for Harold Anthony with the entertainment page.
Hi, I'm Harold Anthony. New Baltimore audiences and old friends are invited to join Bobby McFerrin, who is scheduled to make an appearance at the Meyerhoff Symphony Hall May 4th at 8 p.m. Bobby McFerrin is not only one of the most innovative vocalists in popular music, but perhaps the only contemporary singer to perform and record completely solo a cappella. A New York native and son of professional classical singers, Bobby considers his own misguided label as a jazz singer as limiting. He is incredibly versatile and recognizable to the American public, whether they are aware of this or not, for having sang the Levi's 501 Blues and the Cosby Show theme. And he also teaches kids the alphabet on Sesame Street. Upon witnessing a Bobby McFerrin show, one realizes that this is a one-time only performance. A show is never the same a second time around. An amazing grab bag of musical styles, comedy, dance, and performance art. And with no further ado, here's a mini concert with Bobby McFerrin.
Oh, baby, I'm thinking about your face. Oh, baby, I'm thinking about your body, thinking about your face. Oh, baby, I'm thinking about your body. Oh, baby, I'm thinking about your face. Oh, baby, I'm thinking about your body, thinking about your face. Whatever I'm thinking about your mind, yeah, thinking about your face. Baby, I'm thinking about your body. Baby, I'm thinking about your face. Baby, I'm thinking about your body. Thinking about your face. Drive away, drive so far, no one's gonna find me. Put my foot on the gas, accelerate, drive so fast, no one's gonna catch me.
Bobby McFerrin is an artist of extraordinary breadth. His art is beyond modern, as old as the human voice, and as new as the next moment. From his 1986 solo LP, that was Spontaneous Inventions. Well, that just about wraps it up for another Sunday. I'm Harold Anthony, inviting you back next week when I'll feature the world's greatest entertainer. I'll see you then.
Next week, we'll be talking about summer getaways.
And we'll also bid a fond farewell to a friend.
Well, thanks for being with us. I'm B.T. Bentley.
I'm Jackie Hall. Have a good Sunday.
Bye-bye.